The imposing federal courthouse loomed over the streets of Washington, D.C., a monolithic fortress of steel and stone where the fate of a nation's political future was about to be decided. Today, amidst a clamor of protesters, some chanting AOC's name in fervent support, others demanding her swift incarceration, Alexandria Ocasio Cortez was not merely a politician defending policy. She was a defendant fighting for her survival. Stepping out of a sleek black SUV, AOC's chin was held high and her movements were deliberate. Cameras flashed as she ascended the courthouse steps, flanked by her legal team. She was well accustomed to controversy and media storms, but this trial was different. It wasn't another televised debate on Capitol Hill. It was a federal trial that could redefine her career and perhaps shatter the progressive movement she had helped build. Inside the packed courtroom, every seat in the gallery was occupied by journalists, political operatives, and legal analysts, each with notepads, cameras, and a collective sense that history was being made. At the prosecution's table sat Pam Bondi, the relentless former attorney general turned federal prosecutor. Bondi had been meticulously selected by the administration to lead this case, and today, she was determined to let the law speak louder than politics. Beside her, Caroline Leavitt, a rising conservative media strategist, sat silently, her role to ensure the court of public opinion tilted against AOC. The judge, an older man revered for his fairness yet notorious for his intolerance of theatrics, entered the courtroom with measured authority. Tapping his gavel, he announced, "Court is now in session." Bondi strode to the center of the room, her tailored suit immaculate, her expression as cold and precise as a scalpel. "Your Honor, today we bring before you a case of national significance. The defendant, Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, is charged with knowingly obstructing federal law enforcement and conspiring to aid individuals in evading deportation orders. The evidence will demonstrate that she did far more than merely advocate for immigration reform. She provided explicit instructions that actively hindered ICE operations." A murmur rippled through the gallery. AOC sat composed, her face inscrutable, while her attorney, James Calloway, reclined with a calm detachment. "Ladies and gentlemen," Calloway began, his tone measured, "the prosecution will try to depict my client as a lawbreaker, but what she did was simply educate people about their constitutional rights. If informing citizens of their legal protections is criminal, where do we draw the line? Will attorneys be jailed for advising their clients? Will journalists be prosecuted for reporting on civil liberties?" With the stage set, Bondi called her first witness, a tall, broad-shouldered Special Agent Robert Marks from the Department of Homeland Security. After taking his oath, Marks explained his role in overseeing immigration enforcement operations. "My team focuses on high-priority deportation cases," he said. "During a recent raid, our agents encountered a suspect who, instead of answering the door, was seen reading from a document, a guide provided by Representative Ocasio-Cortez's office, detailing how to avoid ICE intervention." Bondi's voice rang out as she held up a printed transcript. "If ICE comes to your door without a judicial warrant, do not comply. Do not speak. Do not sign anything." Her words echoed ominously. "This isn't mere education. It's a roadmap for evasion." Calloway rose for cross-examination. "Agent Marks, in your 15 years of service, you're well aware that the Fourth Amendment protects citizens from unlawful searches. If law enforcement lacks a judicial warrant, isn't it their right to be refused entry?" Marks hesitated before replying. "Technically, yes." Calloway pressed on. "So, the individual simply exercised his legal right? That, in my view, is not obstruction. It is the law in action." A low murmur of dissent filled the room. Undeterred, Bondi then summoned Officer Daniel Briggs, a veteran of ICE with over 2 decades of experience. Briggs recalled a raid targeting a man with a final deportation order. "We arrived with full authorization," he recounted. "But when we knocked, the man, using his phone, read aloud from a live broadcast of a Know Your Rights seminar hosted by Representative Ocasio Cortez. By the time we tried to proceed, he was gone." Bondi emphasized, This intercepted message is concrete evidence that her materials directly led to federal agents being thwarted. Calloway objected. Correlation does not equal causation. The suspect could have learned his rights from various sources. The judge sustained the objection briefly, but Bondi pressed on with the evidence, her tone unyielding. Next, Bondi called Rebecca Langley, a former immigration officer who had resigned under controversial circumstances. Langley testified that during her 17 years at ICE, she observed a troubling shift. When Representative Ocasio Cortez spoke out, it wasn't just about informing citizens. Her words ignited resistance. Agents felt undermined and operations were compromised, Langley stated. Despite Calloway's attempts to downplay her account as mere perception, her testimony lent credence to Bondi's argument that AOC's influence had tangible, disruptive effects on enforcement. As the trial progressed, Bondi's strategy began to mount pressure on the defense. Finally, she called the government's piece de resistance, a series of internal ICE memos projected on a large screen for all to see. One memo, in particular, detailed a 38% drop in successful detentions after AOC's materials went viral. These documents, Bondi declared to the jury, proved that her orchestrated campaign had real, measurable consequences on federal operations. The courtroom erupted in a mix of shocked gasps and murmurs. AOC's attorney, Calloway, stood and addressed the assembly with a cool resolve. Ladies and gentlemen, what you've seen is not an incitement to violence, but the exercise of constitutional rights. Informing people of their legal protections is a fundamental freedom. If we start criminalizing that, we risk undermining the very foundations of our democracy. The battle of testimonies and evidence continued throughout the day, each side trading blows with razor-sharp rhetoric. Bondi's relentless pursuit of a narrative of obstruction was met with Calloway's counterpoints emphasizing constitutional liberties. Between poignant witness statements and heated cross-examinations, the jury listened intently, aware that their decision would set a precedent far beyond this courtroom. During a brief recess, tensions simmered in hushed corridors. AOC exchanged a steely glance with Calloway, a silent acknowledgement of the stakes at hand. "We're not just fighting a trial," she whispered. "We're fighting for the future of free expression." Calloway replied with a wry smile. "Then we must be ready for every eventuality." When court resumed, Bondi delivered her final closing argument with unyielding determination. This trial is not about political rhetoric. It's about the rule of law. No one, not even an elected official, is above the law. The evidence shows that Representative Ocasio Cortez deliberately obstructed federal enforcement. Today, you must decide that such subversion will not be tolerated. Calloway's rebuttal was equally impassioned. "You have heard all the testimony. My client did not encourage illegal acts. She merely informed citizens of their rights, a right enshrined in our Constitution. Criminalizing that is a dangerous step towards eroding our freedoms." Hours later, after lengthy deliberations, the jury returned. The courtroom fell into a heavy silence as the foreperson read the verdict. In the case of the United States versus Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, on the charge of obstruction of justice, we find the defendant not guilty. A collective gasp swept through the gallery. AOC's face remained impassive for a moment before the tension visibly eased. Federal marshals moved forward to escort her out, and while reporters clamored for immediate reactions, AOC paused, looking out over the courthouse steps at a Washington sky beginning to clear. Outside, amid a throng of cameras and flashing lights, AOC's attorney leaned in. "They couldn't break you today." AOC replied softly, "This isn't the end. The fight for our rights continues." Across the street, Pam Bondi's steely gaze faltered ever so slightly, a silent acknowledgement that, despite her formidable performance, the battle had not swung entirely in her favor. As the courthouse doors closed behind the departing defendant, the nation was left to reflect on the profound implications of the trial. In a world where the boundaries between political theater and the rule of law blur ever more, this verdict sent ripples through both legal and political circles. While the prosecution's case had delivered a series of powerful blows, The defense's steadfast emphasis on constitutional rights had ultimately carried the day.